Wait for that to kick in. Okay, right. Welcome back, all. We're going to do part two now of the London Assembly Police Commission, and we go over to that now. Welcome back.
You know,
So more
worldwide
police
events.
officers, basically more police officers.
Yes.
Yeah, but then the mayor's reducing the amount of police officers. So how does that add up? If you're asking for more money to make London safer, why are you watching the Metropolitan Police reduce in numbers?
The mayor has been clear that he's prioritising neighbourhood policing. That's why he's time on time made sure that he's put up the precept and has increased his budget from 19% to 25%, a quarter of the Metropolitan Police Force's budget through that uplift in council tax. He's never shied away from investing in the police because he understands that, and it's why we have continual conversations with government about the importance of funding through things like the NIC.
For time reasons only, for your sake, Chair, I will stop. But I will come back to this because what you say actually doesn't add up.
Thank you, Assemblymember Hall. Assemblymember Cooper.
Coming back to the topic of the discussion, we were offered a private briefing by the Metropolitan Police after the Commissioner's letter had come out so that we could go into some of the details with the senior officers as to why they had made the decision to use the Section 13 banning order. And I just wondered if you could set out what information they gave to MOPAC and to yourself, Deputy Mayor, as to why they felt the Al Quds march met the threshold for a Section 13 banning order for a march, where we've had numerous other protests virtually every weekend, regular Palestine Solidarity Campaign led protests that have only been subject to Section 12 and Section 14 conditions about where they meet, where the route might be, etc., etc. What's your understanding about what the difference is between why the first time since 2012 the Section 13 ban on a march was given on this occasion?
So I'd say it's based on two things: the intelligence they had in relation to violence and disorder, but also primarily as well, I think it's understandable given the international context of what's happening with the conflict of in the Middle East, that they felt additionally concerned about that.
So when you say violence and disorder, do you mean from people on the protest or people who might have chosen to counter-protest, or both?
I think that they were obviously aware that there could be a high number of people on the protest, but also that there was a counter-protest planned, and it was about the management of both of those. I think the static protest that did happen, there was 12 arrests on the back of that, but they were able, I think, quite successfully through conversations with both of the organisers of both of the protests pre the static demonstration to enable it to go forward and views to be expressed in the safest way possible.
Yes, my understanding is that the static demonstration and the counter demonstration did both go ahead, but they were on different sides of the River Thames?
Yes.
And nowhere near Trafalgar Square, which was obviously hosting St Patrick's Day celebrations, which was one of the questions that I put to the officers about making sure that, because I don't think that would have made a good mix, because Al Quds have tried to use Trafalgar Square before.
Well, I mean, I think, Assembly Member Cooper, that your point really talks to why this issue is so important. In London as a capital city, at any time, we can have 4 or 5 different significant events going on at once, which goes to my previous point about the importance of us getting the NIC so that the police can enable the whole of the city to be able to be safe.
Do you think there's something a bit strange about only being able to ban a march and not being able to ban a static protest? It's been raised with me by several constituents, some of whom felt that the march should not have been banned, some of whom felt that the march should have been banned, but also that the static protest. I mean, people have different views about these matters, but it's quite hard to write back to a constituent and say, oh, but the march has been banned, but there will still be a static protest. People don't quite understand why one is banned and one cannot be banned using the Section 13.
I think it's about making sure that the police feel confident in their operational stance around what's happening. So I think, it's obviously enabled them to enable democracy to happen by having a static demonstration rather than a mobile one. But I think your outline of the different considerations is why the independence of the police on public order is important, because they need to be able to make sure they're using the intelligence they're given, the conversations they have with the organisers, to take the best approach to enable protests to happen.
I mean, I've never been in charge of organising the policing of demonstrations. I'm just going to put this point to you, actually, Kenny, if I may. But I am assuming, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that policing a static demonstration is easier than trying to police a moving object, as it were.
And it's easier to police to counter protests as well. That's right.
So having something static is easier to... OK. Do you welcome the government's... Going back to you, Deputy Mayor, if I may. Do you welcome the government's proposed amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill, which would allow senior officers to take account of the cumulative impact of protest activity when considering whether to impose conditions under Section 12 and 14 of the Public Order Act? And obviously, as we know, there have been a very large number of demonstrations on the same topic going on in London since the 7th of October 23.
I think that given how often this discussion has even come up in this committee, that it's something that it's really helpful that the government is grappling with. I welcome the Lord MacDonald independent review, which will look at whether public order legislation is fit for purpose and whether it adequately protects communities from intimidation and hate, and whether it strikes the right balance between what we've discussed of freedom of expression in that context against disorder and keeping communities safe. So it's really, I think it's welcome that they're looking at that. I think the Metropolitan Police Service have done a very good job given the increase in the amount of protests that we have seen. I think it's important to understand that what the legislation is looking at is not further banning protests, but it's looking at how conditions might be used differently and the cumulative impact that it is having on communities. I reflect actually the visit I went on recently in Lambeth, that an area like Waterloo, if you're a resident of that area, you're seeing protests pretty much weekly, and that's having an impact on your day-to-day life. We know, we've discussed in this committee before, the impact that it has had on certain communities, the cumulative impact on that, and the conditions the police have used on the basis of that. So I think it's welcome that the government is looking at it. However, what I would say is that we should all agree that democracy and protest is a key part of what makes our democracy special, and that everyone of all opinions can express that.
Yes, which is why I think it's interesting, it's good to hear your comments on this, that they're looking at 12 and 14, which are the sections that apply the conditions to the activities, as opposed to Section 13, which is the banning of the march. But we've got some more points about this, but I'm going to pass over to the Chair now. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And I will be quick this time, I promise. So I appreciate that this is a very rarely used power to ban a procession, march, whatever you choose to call it. And I think the last time it was used is back in 2012. But given the levels of, let's be honest, hate and incitement that we see at these protests, these marches that have been allowed to continue and are still allowed to go ahead, Will you be expecting this power to be used again? And if so, would you welcome or support it in those contexts?
I mean, you're asking me to comment on a hypothetical, so I can't really do that. What I would say, I think, is it's important that the police continue to work proactively with the organisers of protests, that they use the intelligence that they're given to understand and assess how protests are likely to be enacted and the resourcing that might come off the back of that.
Interpret that as a no, then. Thank you. Back to the chair.
Thank you. Assemblymember Best.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I was just caught off guard because you said to Assemblymember Wilson that you couldn't comment on a hypothetical, but this protest is organised annually.
Yes, but things can happen annually in very different contexts and with different intelligence bases.
We know it will happen next year, though,
How do we know what will happen
because it's an
next
annual
year?
event. That an annual event would mean it happens every
as
year.
I've just said, things can happen annually in different contexts. So things can, happen the same time every year and the context be completely different. The context of this protest was in
Do you
the
think
start
the
of the global conflict.
The IHRC might be the good guys next year? How much context can change in a year?
This is why I think it's really important that the police are enabled to support protests without fear or favour or political interference, because I don't think a conversation on how democracy is enacted should have that kind of bent to it.
We're talking about a group that this whole assembly, cross-party, has agreed should be prescribed. We're not. This isn't a difference of opinion. I mean, I know you yourself haven't refused to say that today, but this whole assembly, cross-party, has agreed that the IRHC should be a prescribed group.
The prescription of groups, as you know, and we've previously mentioned, is a decision for the Home Secretary. So
This is a big decision for the Met, though, and I just think the fact as a Deputy Mayor you wouldn't say, yes, I would support this action being taken next year, is speaking volumes. I think that they would need... of course, we see the facts as they come next year, but all things known as they are today, saying, yes, I would be happy to support this decision again next year, I think would be good to show that political will.
I've said in this very committee today that based on the intelligence that the Metropolitan Police Service had, that I understand why they took the decision to move from a moving protest to a static one.
And Assemblymember Wilson asked you, would you support that decision again?
I'm saying it would have to be.
No, it's not what you're saying.
On...
I know you're not answering the question, but the question is, would you support it again?
If all things were equal, yes.
Okay, perfect. Coming back to the cumulative impact threshold, what discussions have you had with government around that?
I mean, we look forward to feeding into the MacDonald review, as I've previously said, that's coming forward. I think it's really important that we use our data and insight in our conversations, especially in the CT hub that we have, to make sure that we're feeding in to those conversations, and we'll continue to do so.
Sorry, so you have spoken to government?
Yes, as previously mentioned, we regularly talk to government about the impact that being a capital city has. We've seen, for example, in September, I think there was 19,000 hours of police work on the back of protests. We know that being in a capital city is different. We know that people from around the country come here to protest, and it's important that we use that information to talk to the government about the resources that the Metropolitan Police Service
So what was
need.
the outcome of that discussion around cumulative impact thresholds?
As I said, it's a continual conversation as they move forward with the
So
bill.
what's the outcome so far?
Well, that they're having a conversation with the bill. They're getting Lord
They're having a
MacDonald to have
conversation
a
with the bill.
review. They're having we're moving that conversation into the legislative work of government, and it's welcome that Lord MacDonald is doing a review on the areas that I previously laid out, and that we will feed into that.
So what's the outcome of your discussions so far?
So the outcomes of the discussions we've had have been many. They have, like, the discussions that we have on the impact of residents, of certain community groups, the start of protests in particular area are reflective of the insight that we understand through the work that we do and the conversations we've
So
had.
does that mean you want them to give you lots of powers through this, that you can... Is that what the outcome is, that you're giving that all that as evidence as to why you need really unrestricted powers of what you can use as an impact threshold?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think we need to have a balanced approach.
Okay, so what
As I
does it
said
mean? Yeah.
previously, it's important that democracy continues to be enacted in our capital city, that we... However, I think it's also important that we recognise that the use of conditions have been used on the back of the cumulative impact on certain communities, and it's welcome that the government might look at how that moves forward in terms of legislation.
Okay, so you're not asking for further powers, you're kind of happy with what they're going to give you? You're just happy, yeah?
I think, as AC Twist said last time he was here, I think the Metropolitan Police Service do a great job at managing the protests.
Just on the cumulative impact threshold, we're just talking about that one kind of aspect of conversation with government and the outcomes from your conversations with government on that.
We haven't asked for additional powers.
So you're happy. So when I said what's been your outcome of that, it's just there hasn't been an outcome. You haven't asked for anything to be changed. You haven't asked for anything in addition.
We've asked for we understand the cumulative impact that continual protests have had on certain communities and residents, and that has been being looked at. What I'm failing to understand, and maybe it's the question, is whether you're asking whether the mayor has asked for additional powers in relation to policing. I can be clear that
I'm
that's
trying to
not
ask
the case.
what the outcome from the discussion was. What did you walk away? Did you just give the... It seems like you're saying you just gave evidence of what we knew and said, tell us how you would like it to be.
No, we understand that government is looking at this issue, and
So
part
what
of
did
the
you ask
reason
for?
we asked for them to look at whether the legislation is fit for purpose, whether, like the deep dive that we had with the Metropolitan Police Service last year, the thematic we had on public order looked at the balance of neighbourhood policing and public protest. We looked at the impact it's having on communities. We looked at the resourcing of the Metropolitan Police. And these are the things that we have fed into government.
So
and we welcome.
that's the evidence side. What's the outcome? Like, what's the outcome that you're wanting from that?
We want the government to look at the legislative framework in which public order is taking place. And
So you want,
we hope
but I think what you're saying is you want them to look at it, but you don't have strong feelings about what you want the outcome to look like.
Assembly Member Best, shall we let the Deputy Mayor tell us what she's saying rather than what you think she's saying? So, Assembly Deputy Mayor, and then I am going to move on.
Okay, well, if I could then...
Could you let the Deputy Mayor answer the question, Assembly Member? You asked a question. The Deputy Mayor, could you answer the question, please?
we understand that protest is a positive thing. It's an enactment of democracy. However, we also understand that the increase in protests in London has meant a huge amount of resource by the Metropolitan Police. We ask that to be recognised by government, both in funding, but also on top of that, we recognise the impact that it has on residents and understand how those conditions could be used.
Can I be more helpful? Is there a numerical kind of value to attach to this? So, for example, is it every weekend or is it 1 or 2 a year, but those 2 events cause a lot of disruption?
I don't think we would ask for something like that because of the nature of protests and when they happen. And once again, this is why it's really important.
I think people would be worried, won't they? So they'd want to know how this might restrict what they could do or how it's not going to stop restrictions. I think people would want to know, are we talking about if it happens every weekend, it's a nuisance, or it happens once or twice a year, but the Mayor and the Met don't really like the event, so they're stopping it?
I think this is exactly why there needs to be continual operational independence, because I don't think it would be right for the mayor or myself to say this protest should go ahead and this protest shouldn't. It needs to be taken.
So I said the mayor and the Met. I meant MOPAC and the Met.
We don't have the legislative power to determine that, and we're not asking for that. I think it's important that we understand the cumulative impact that protests have in certain areas, but that will always have to be in the context of what's happening across the city on that day. And this is why the conversation is about conditions, not a blanket framework.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Moving on. Assembly Member Garbett.
Thank you. I just wanted to start by saying that I reject the frame that the frequent Palestine Solidarity Campaign protests are violent. There's absolutely no evidence for that, and the number of arrests have been low given the number of people. And the arrests made last year, for example, in January, there were 70 arrests, and we haven't even had the transparent data on the charges that have come from those arrests, which I think is one of the biggest issues around this, that the lack of transparency and accountability around data. I just want to draw attention to the fact that we've got Netpol and some other organisations in the audience who are really concerned about the crackdown on protest and the lack of accountability. I know they've written to you. Netpol wrote to you with their 4 demands from the coalition. So I was just going to ask you about some of those. So yeah, it's really concerned about the lack of accountability regarding protest powers and the way that they've been used in London. And one of the asks is around how we can could we have more transparent data on the uses of sections 12, 14 and 14A and the way that these conditions are used, because currently the data is available but not in a very usable form, and we always get it kind of after the fact, or it's down to organisations like Netpol who found that some of the sections have been used disproportionately by the Metropolitan Police. So it's, used by the Metropolitan Police. So it's, how can we have that data more, transparently on sections 12, 14 and 14?
I mean, I haven't seen the letter as of yet, but we could look to...
I think it was sent a little while ago. But maybe they can resend it. But it's
I can go and ask about that. But
because they've got 4 demands. One's around releasing the guidance that Metropolitan Police officers use to make decisions around their sections and the use, and it links to. So that's one of them. And the other one relates to what we asked at the Assembly through this committee around guidance to the public around how the powers are used, because I think it's pretty wild that the Met have got all these powers that they haven't communicated to the public how they use those powers in the context of protest.
So we can, as I said, I'll go away and look at that letter and look at what's possible. I understand that on the back of a previous conversation here, that Kenny did have a conversation with the NPCC, is that right? With the college?
Yes, I think you're talking about recommendation 11 from aren't you? And I did have emailed you about that, just to sort of say we did go and speak to the college who don't feel that they can take forward that recommendation because they feel it would have to be on a protest-specific thing and they couldn't put out...
So then would it be back to the Met or someone, surely someone has a responsibility for describing to the public how these powers are used? That's like a fundamental of democracy.
So there's the potential for statutory guidance on all of this, and the Met do put out communications in advance about how they intend to police different issues. I think what you're looking for, if I'm understanding, is you think there should be even greater specificity around that. I think in a sort of ideal world, that would be the case. I think the problem when you're policing some of these protests and other issues is you have to deal with the sort of dynamic in an ever-changing situation where the guidance is never going to be able to cover every possible eventuality in that regard.
No, but I think it's just asking how the Met make that decision, because I know obviously they've got their own guidance on how they make those decisions, so it's making that public. And it's interesting what you said there as well around when the decisions are being made, because another one of the asks is a human rights impact assessment on the decisions made in advance to kind of restrict people's rights. So is that something that you could discuss with the Met?
Do you mean there will always be legal views taken within the Met about, because obviously the right to protest is a sort of cornerstone of democracy. equally, Parliament, which is the home of UK democracy, has given the Met these powers and has said that, and has determined that it can interfere with those other rights where it feels that it's justified. The Met will take legal advice on those, because there's always going to be a difficult balance to be struck in that regard.
I think that's what we're calling for, that transparency around the balance of disruption with how you protect Article 11 and the freedom of assembly. Because I know in the past, and I've raised this a number of times, that sometimes conditions are used to protect, I'm not going to go over the one that I always talk about in terms of that Friday restriction on a bank holiday when a business, to protect businesses, and PSC weren't allowed to ban drums. And it's just, how are those decisions made from a human rights assessment perspective?
So I'm happy to have the conversation again with the Met, that some of the issues which you get into looking at this is some of the intelligence and the intelligence application in terms of how the law then applies to that, and then whether or not you would be willing in all cases to release the kind of intelligence sources, etc. Now, different people will have different views on that, but again, that'll be a different way, a difficult decision.
I think that, I think the one I'm talking about was just disruption to business, so I don't, and the other one is just on community of impact. Obviously, we know that the Met have been using this already, so they've been using the term community of impact. So are they currently in a bit of a grey area between stating that they've been used community of impact as a reason to stop protests, with the law now catching up with them? Like, it feels like they've just been doing that without the law and just hoping it would catch up.
So they've been working with the organisers of protests in a sort of sensible way, recognising that on certain communities and in certain areas there can be an impact, but that's not the legal reason for which conditions have been imposed in those states. But
I think there was one around the PSC march, maybe 6 months, 9 months ago, that they were told that they couldn't. The term community of impact was specifically used by the Metropolitan Police as a reason for that protest being stopped.
Okay, I'm happy to have a look again if I've got that wrong.
Yeah, it does feel like it's a bit, playing catch up, like we've seen in other areas like live facial recognition and the law being kind of used retrospectively. Thank you. It's good that you're going to respond to the organisations. I think they're raising some really concerning points about how these powers are being used disproportionately. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. I feel obliged to mention human rights and the human rights of the businesses, the human rights of the people that live in the vicinities of some of these shocking demonstrations, and the human rights of the Jewish community, if you like, when they have to listen to these hate marches weeks after weeks after weeks. So if the Greens think it's appropriate to talk about human rights, we can talk about human rights as well, because there are other people involved. I did like the idea of wanting to know what those 70 people were arrested for, and whether, well, you said arrested, so I'm just quoting you, because I'd like to know if they were arrested, were they actually charged? Because some of the behaviour at these demonstrations is utterly appalling. So I commend the police for using all of these different things that they can. I'd like to know more about them, because I probably would be questioning why they weren't using them more often, because the public have got human rights and they need to be looked at as well. I'll leave it at that, Chair, because I know we're short of time.
Thank you. Assemblymember Duval.
So if I heard the earlier contribution between Assemblymember Garbett and yourselves, look, if you've got access to the data for those decisions and you know a decision's been made, then that can be followed up. I'm not sure whether transparency comes into it. There may well be an issue of the legal process catching up with new forms of protests and issues. That's always been under review and legislation. As long as we stand by the right to protest, but recognising the right to protest, there are conditions. There are. It's not a free-for-all. We don't live in some free market economy or laissez-faire economy in that sense of protests, that you can go off and do what you like and there isn't any comeback on it. And I don't just quite understand why we need to share that. At the appropriate time, the frameworks will become clearer, but the framework is clearer now, isn't it? If you cooperate with the police and actually listen, and there's a bit of to-ing and fro-ing, then you get the right to protest. Some colleagues around the table might not like that, but that's what happens. Is that not the case? That actually, if you want the data and going behind the decisions, it's available. But why would you want to provide those decisions earlier when you know that people will go into the courts just to cause misery and mayhem before we even start on the sake of that? There are people that are just legally happy to do that and therefore disturb and corrupt the process that we're already in. So is that data available, as the member said? Is there information that backs up in terms of decisions taken by the Metropolitan Police, in your mind?
I mean, I think as Kenny said, that those decisions are reviewed in a legal framework and they get legal advice. So it is in that framework that happens. I mean, I think this the demonstration that we're talking about today is a kind of illustration of what you were saying. I've heard from officers in the Metropolitan Police that they had constructive conversations with the organisers of both static demonstrations and were able, therefore, to move forward in a way that, alleviated some of the concerns they had from a moving demonstration to a static demonstration, enabled that to go forward. There was 12 arrests, some of those in relation to hateful language. But I think it's a real demonstration that, as you said, it's not one or the other, that the police take all of the factors and move their way forward. I think, the Metropolitan Police Service put out information before the protest, the demonstration, and that actually, I would hope, helped people decide whether that was something that they wanted to attend or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Assembly Member Small-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to shift the conversation ever so slightly to static religious celebration. Trafalgar Square has hosted celebrations for Easter, Hanukkah and Diwali. However, Shadow Justice Secretary Nick Timothy referred to the Ramadan event recently as an act of domination, words which were supported by Nigel Farage. Deputy Mayor, why do you think the Conservatives and Reform only have an issue with religious celebration when it comes to Ramadan?
I think you're right, Assembly Member Edwards. The Mayor has funded, Small Edwards, the Mayor has funded community cohesion events of all kinds in Trafalgar Square, whether it be Black on the Square, whether it be St George's Day celebrations, whether it be Hanukkah celebrations. Some recognise the multi-faith city in which we live in. Some are more about the diversity of our city, and it's a key part, interestingly, about the conversation that we started on, the key part of the work he does to celebrate the diversity of our city, and I think that's something that we should rightly be proud of.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to take a break. So we're going to take 5 minutes, hard 5 minutes, because we've got some more questions to answer afterwards. Thank you very much, and we'll see you very shortly.
Sorry, bear with me 2 seconds and we go past the break that they're having, and we're going to go forward from that now and carry on, okay? But just give me 2 seconds to catch up. Right, okay. Right, we caught up. So, let's go back. I'll catch up with you in a second. Stay on subject, please, in the chat.
Back to our continuation of questions to the Deputy Mayor. For people at home, I have swapped the 2 items on the published agenda. So we will now be looking at PCSOs and red route enforcement first, and then the active bystander campaign questions will come afterwards. So Assembly Member Roberts.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. It is still morning, isn't it? Yes, I think. Oh, no, it's afternoon now. There we are. Deputy Mayor, you'll be aware that there are roughly 60 PCSOs that are being withdrawn from the red route enforcement role and being tupied over to a private company. What assessment did MOPAC make of the Met's decision to withdraw PCSOs from red route enforcement?
I think we need to, well, the decision to withdraw from red route enforcement was along the Commissioner's wider decision to focus on core policing areas. You'll note that we've discussed that many times during that committee, so it was in that guise.
Okay, if I may ask the question again, so what assessment did MOPAC make of the Met's decision to withdraw PCSOs from red route enforcement?
We've had a number of conversations around this because obviously it's in the wider context of the negotiation with TfL on the service agreement that they have across this. So we've talked to them about the need to move these officers, but the Commissioner's operational rationale for the change was to enable the greater prioritisation of neighbourhood policing, as discussed previously.
Okay, and again, maybe I'm not being clear. So I asked what assessment. You said you had conversations. What was the outcome of the conversations? What was your view on the decision?
We know that due to TfL's constrained finances and the police's constrained finances in the negotiations on what the service level agreement will be, that there has to be changes in the current previous agreement based on the budget lines. We've discussed, we worked through that. We understand as well, as in line with our police and crime plan, that the priority is neighbourhood policing, and in order to give the offer that we want to give across London of having dedicated ward officers and PCSOs in neighbourhood teams focusing on high volume crime, that those changes are understandably made.
Okay, but do you support it? Quick question, very quick question. Do you support the removal of 63 PCSOs from their current employment and being tupied over to a private parking enforcement firm?
So I think there's several issues with the kind of summary you've given.
Well, it's fairly straightforward. It is happening. Do you support it?
Well, what I would say is I know that there are ongoing conversations with TfL about how that contract is moving forward, in how they enact the red route enforcement. There's also the wider conversation. The police have obviously given the PCSOs hold those roles currently. It's only right that they're offered those 2P arrangements, and that once those arrangements have been discussed and consulted with those officers, further conversations might be enacted.
Yeah, it's interesting that use of the word offer, because we've had correspondence from one of the serving PCSOs who tell us that their voluntary transfer requests remain frozen, so they can't ask for voluntary transfer to another role within the Met. They're not being offered a 2P transfer, they're being told it's a 2P transfer. They can't move. They've got nowhere else to go. So are you still happy with the word offer?
I think that that's not taking, I think we need to be understanding that the national grant for neighbourhood policing hasn't come through yet, and that's a key part of this discussion, because then the police will know how many PCSOs they'll be able to afford in that context. And also, my understanding from when we've asked the police about this is that sequentially the 2P has been offered as the first step, and then those other steps will happen.
Okay. Again, I would question the word offer. May I ask what discussions has MOPAC had with the Met regarding the future of the 63 PCSOs that are currently delivering red route enforcement?
I've had a number of meetings with my equivalent, the Deputy Mayor for Transport, alongside senior Metropolitan Police officers, MOPAC officers and TfL officers to look at this issue. We understand it in the context of both the financial constraints, the overall service level agreement, and also the Mayor's wider policies on outsourcing. And so in those contexts, we're working it through.
Okay. And the Mayor has told us that there will be, and I quote, there will be no period when the red routes are not being properly enforced. How will MOPAC monitor the transition to guarantee this?
So TfL will be monitoring that, and when spoken to them about that, they've said this will be primarily done through their CCTV operation. That's currently how the majority of monitoring happens, with only a relatively small amount of operational enforcement happening. So that's how they're ensuring the continuity will continue.
Okay. What's your understanding of the role that these PCSOs currently fulfill in terms of how much time they spend on actual red route enforcement on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, part of the reason that they're PCSOs has been that they can feed into the wider police offer, but they primarily their role has been red route enforcement.
Primarily. Okay. Would it surprise you to learn that the correspondence which I've received tells me that 90% of our duties consist of high visibility patrols and crime reduction? Red route ticketing takes under 30 minutes a day of our working day. 30 minutes.
I think that I suppose goes to part of the reason why the Commissioner wants to move this on from this model and focus on the wider policing office. My understanding was that their role was around red route enforcement, and that's what they were trained and focused to do. But I suppose if you're saying that someone has told you that it's not that, that reflects this shift the Commissioner wants to see moreover.
That doesn't really make any sense, does it? Because if we've got experienced PCSOs, people who are visible, they're patrolling regularly in their neighbourhoods, and that their duties, 90% of our duties consist of high visibility patrols and crime reduction, then saying that moving them over to a private enforcement contract is enhancing community policing, that doesn't make any sense at all, does it?
Sorry, I'm saying that the Commissioner has said he wants to have the focus
No, I
on
appreciate what the
neighbourhood
Commissioner wants to
policing.
do, but you're the Deputy Mayor for Policing, and again, in this meeting, we're asking you for a view, what your thought is, what your rationale, how do you interpret that as the Deputy Mayor for Policing? Do you think that makes any sense at all, to take experienced, community-based police officers, transfer them over to a private parking contract, and the Commissioner, as you believe, is doing this because it will enhance community policing? That doesn't make any sense, does it? I mean, if you're going to take a step back and look, it makes no sense at all.
I think it's a conflation of several elements, as I've previously said. I think in a time where both TfL and the Metropolitan Police's budgets have changed, they've had to come to an agreement on what they can do moving forward. One of the decisions has been that they look at the red route enforcement, and the Commissioner has said that the focus needs to be on neighbourhood policing, so they can continue to do the work that they've done and are getting positive traction on neighbourhood policing in terms of the reduction we're seeing from theft from person, homicide, robbery, burglary, and that is really important. TfL are looking at how they move forward with red route enforcement and have moved forward with the procurement of a private company. However, I believe that's still being considered in the long term about how that work goes forward. And I think it's right that those PCSOs have been offered the TUPE arrangement in that context.
I'll try again, one last time. Do you think it makes any sense at all to take experienced PCSOs out of the Metropolitan Police, out of their patches, and transfer them to a private contractor when the whole drive behind everything the Commissioner is claiming is doing is about neighbourhood policing? Does that make sense?
And as previously stated, that's why we need to understand how many officers we
63.
can... No, that's not what I was saying. I was saying that we need to understand when we get the national grant for neighbourhood policing, how many officers we'll need in that context, because that will enable us to understand how many PCSOs, how many dedicated ward officers, and how these 60 fit in that context.
Just humour me momentarily. How is it then that the Mayor was able to put forward in his manifesto that there would be 1,300 additional PCSOs and neighbourhood police officers when he didn't know what the grant that you've just been mentioning was? He was able to make the pledge, but now apparently you can't comment on just the loss of 63, 1,300 versus 63.
We know already that overall the likely settlement will give us 399. What we're waiting for from government for this year, that's on top of the 460, I think it was, from last year. So we are moving towards the target that the Mayor has outlined for his whole term, and we're seeing that uplift. This is the joy of working with a Labour government that understands the importance of of policing neighbourhoods, and we're working together in that context. I think what we're waiting for is the detail of the conditions in which the government want to put on how many, as previously they have, how many dedicated ward officers they are, what kind of... it's very granular, the conditions, the specific conditions they put on the neighbourhood grant, and in that context we'll move forward.
I see that Kenya's aching to come in, so...
Not aching, just... I mean, so obviously for these 63 PCSOs, they were funded by way of the Special Services Agreement with TfL, and they were funded on the basis of their primary responsibility being red route enforcement. That funding has now ceased. That primary responsibility has now shifted across to TfL and the outsourced contract that they've had. As a result, that budget for those 63 people has disappeared for their primary responsibility, which is the red route enforcement, hence the application of the TUPE. Now, you're saying that we shouldn't lose those people, but at the moment, the point would be that until they actually work through what is the neighbourhood policing guarantee and how that mix is going to work in terms of the mix between PCSOs and police constables, that there isn't the money available for that, and say that actually the determination is that it should all go into police constables as opposed to PCSOs. It seems highly unlikely. But in that case, then you would have 63 PCSOs there that did not have a role and were unfunded. So that's the kind of rationale behind all this. Why could the Mayor say 1,300? Because that was always going to be part of the wider 13,000, which was being promised by the wider mayoral, the wider Labour government at that point. So it was a sort of subset of that, and actually it was only 10%, so it was a fairly modest estimate. When on a funding formula basis it would have been over 22%.
I think it's quite possible to say that the budget might not be there, but to say that they have no role is inaccurate. I mean, the officer that contacted me, when he heard Assistant Commissioner Matt Twist describe their roles as PCSOs that do red route enforcement only, he claimed that to hear my management describe my job this way is a slap in the face of my 22-year career. And I think that this is something which really should be looked at very seriously by the Deputy Mayor and by MOPAC before this decision is finally taken and before it's too late. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
As I've previously said, once we have all of the relevant information, as we have previously and continually throughout this conversation over the year with TfL, we'll continue to look at it.
Thank you. Kenny, could you clarify something that you said, please? So you said that there was special arrangement funding for this from TfL. These officers, were they recruited specifically then to these roles under that funding?
I would doubt that very much, but there are 63 roles which were paid for under the SSA with TfL, which these officers were then fulfilling the requirements of the SSA, and as such, primarily that would be the red route enforcement, which would be why the 2Pay regulations therefore apply to them.
Right, thank you. Moving over to our guest Assembly Member Russell.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, everyone. I'll be very brief. Just really interesting listening to what you were saying. When I spoke with the Mayor about this back in January, he described it as TfL wanting, not unreasonably, he said, to get value for money for what it's spending on traffic enforcement. So the sort of beginning of all of this came out of a desire to do things more affordably. But what it feels like is these PCSOs, many of them, as Assembly Member Roberts has just been saying, have got 20 years of experience working for the Met, and so they seem to be just caught in a breakdown of relations between TfL and the Met. Now, what I just wanted to double check was you've mentioned several times this money that you're waiting to come out. Hold on, I've written about it in
the neighbourhood policing.
The neighbourhood policing, exactly, funding, and it almost seemed like you were suggesting that there might be enough that maybe is there any opportunity that this decision could be unravelled, that these workers could avoid being tupied over to a private company? It just seems extraordinary that people who've been in the public sector for 20 years working for the police, because of a contractual arrangement with TfL that happened to be providing the funding for tasks that seem to have only been taking up a relatively small portion of their time while they were doing their work as PCSOs, it seems extraordinary that they can then find themselves working for a private company, basically doing parking enforcement, which is a very different job. What do you think that neighbourhood funding might provide some elasticity to enable those officers to be taken back into the Met?
We don't currently know, because we don't know the conditions in which that grant will have on it. So that's what we're waiting to find out. I think it's important to state that you're right, Assembly Member Russell, that this conversation is framed in two budgetary contexts, and that those decisions haven't been made in that framework. We'll continue, as I've said, to discuss this issue as we have. I think it's important to recognise that there has been, I think, about 18 months worth of conversation between the Metropolitan Police and the TfL on the whole of the service level agreement, and there's been a lot of negotiations in that space, and primarily positively done. So we will continue to look at this issue. We'll continue to talk to it, and happy to provide any information we can on it.
When are you going to know about that neighbourhood funding?
I think from last year, I think we obviously set the budget, and then it was a couple of months after that.
So 2 months from when the budget was set?
I'm basing that on memory of what happened last year.
So so we could be looking at it coming within a month?
Maybe longer, I reckon. because obviously we're talking about the National Police grant for the whole country. So those conditions are going to be worked through, and then how the Metropolitan Police Service can apply that to their police service.
Okay, and so just to be really clear, if that money comes through and it does enable more PCSOs to be employed in the Met, because I understand there's a gap of 6 months before the contract starts with the private supplier. So does that mean that there is any hope for those 63 PCSOs who are worried about their future and losing their status as PCSOs?
Obviously, they've been offered the 2P arrangements in terms of going forward on that, and that's a decision that they need to take. And then we also need to have the national policing guarantee conditions come through. I don't want to be giving people hope on something that's not my decision to make, but there are things to work through.
Okay, thank you very much. That's really helpful, and I look forward to finding out when that money comes through.
Thank you. Assembly Member Duval.
Apologies for arriving just late for this session, but nothing has changed from what I'm going to ask, except it just reinforced why I need to ask it. Are you not worried and concerned that we're all playing a bit catch-up on this particular project within TfL? You've just mentioned 18 months, but in that 18 months, and we heard from Assembly Member Russell, January she started asking questions, and actually we all learned about this issue coming out from the trade unions and the representatives who had been contacting us. Now, we received reports from the Metropolitan Police Service in the run-up to this budget, and we were given a document with the famous counters in it of the pillars, or whatever it was called at the time, it could have changed on a weekly basis, of different things the Metropolitan Police said must do. I'm surprised this was not one of those issues in terms of its finances, because it was a reorganisational change. It seems to have been going on. And actually, it does seem MOPAC, as well as us, have been catching up on this issue in terms of what the Metropolitan Police were doing. I don't understand. The reason why I'm concerned and worried is about the entire policing budget and about how do we take decisions, how do we make decisions go. Now, I know that we're in difficulty within the budget. We have Matt Twist here, who didn't mention it at all until he was asked a question. Until he was asked a question, even that didn't elicit the full information that we're now receiving now in public about what's going on. So, are you not concerned by that? I know it's not your decision, but surely you must be thinking, Metropolitan Police, why are you not being honest with me, Deputy Mayor for Policing stroke MOPAC, the organisation that is a go-between between you and the London Assembly, you and the Mayor? It's in the tin, Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime. Should they not be held to account about the way this has been developed and the way they've interacted with other decision makers or other scrutineers on this particular issue? Because it's messy. It's messy. It doesn't have to be here. I tell you now, that contract isn't going to happen with the private sector. It sounds like, unless things have moved on greatly, it just doesn't sound very coherent and very well planned, given some of the issues that members have raised about other needs that we've got. You yourself have raised in terms of safer neighbourhood policing that at a time, and I did say this publicly, if we find out that we're getting rid of PCSOs when we've got gaps and vacancies within our safer neighbourhood teams, it will be a disgrace. So, there's my concerns. I'm laying it out, but I'm raising some fundamental questions about the relationship that you're having with the Metropolitan Police Service, and in terms of this, using this process, or lack of process, on an important issue that relates to people's jobs, but is more relates to the organisation of one aspect of our policing service that, quite frankly, should have been done, I think, much better.
We obviously knew through the budget considerations that I think it was last year that the amount of money that TfL was going to be able to provide was going to reduce to 65 million. That was something that was in the budget. That has been completely in the public domain. We knew that. And it is in that context that we have, with MOPEC present, had these conversations around what makes up that service level agreement. I understand that the committee is focusing on one area of that, but it has looked at, you know, all sorts of areas of the current agreement with TfL, and given the reduction, how that might be moving forward, and trying to work, I think, well across those bodies on understanding how we continue to keep Londoners safe, especially on transport. And those issues have been worked through. On this particular issue, I think this is something that we have, myself, as I said, and the Deputy Mayor for Transport pushed a number of times because we have got concerns about it, and I know that is echoed by the Mayor, and that we continue to look at. Negotiations aren't always linear, but I think it's really important that we understand, and your point about the overall numbers for neighbourhood policing has to be understood in that context too.
But that's all very well to have your conversations, and I defend your right to have those conversations in private. I'm going back to some fundamentals. You point to me during the budget process at any time the Metropolitan Police reported to the Budget and Finance Committee that the implications of some of those conversations that you're having with TfL would lead to X, would lead to Y. Right? That level of detail was not ever there. It only became apparent when we were lobbied by the trade unions and by representatives who were affected. Nowhere, Matt Twist did not offer up, nowhere in any of your documentation, not your documentation, MPS documentation of management of change. That was, there was a name for the document, management of change. It had the frontline counters in and a number of other services. It was not included, which leads me to think it was not included. Why? Was it because of incompetence, or was it because you didn't want, not you personally, or the MPS did not want to share that in a public domain? I don't understand how we can go forward, how you can go forward in planning a service, albeit you're dealing with overall totals in finance rather than implications. We're relying on others to tell you what the consequences of reducing a service. I don't understand unless the MPS is fundamentally told what's what at some stage, that this must never happen again. Now, I don't care if you say it privately to them or not. I'd like you to think you could say it publicly. But something needs to be said to the police and about their management of the service and management of change for the future. Because actually policing is too important to be left to the police alone to decide the future of it. That's why we have bodies such as yours and bodies such as this to ask these questions.
I mean, I need to say I agree, Len, and this is one of the reasons we've repeatedly asked London Policing Board and myself around the wider context of these decisions to move to core policing that have had an impact in several areas, whether that be around the changes in relation to schools, and we've discussed that here, whether that be in relation to the decisions in courts and the wider criminal justice partnership, to name a couple. I think those conversations, we continue to push on that and understand why those decisions are being made. Obviously, the Commissioner has to have the ability to operationalise policing to enable the things that we are saying are important, and that neighbourhood policing, we have all agreed, is important, yourself included, and we need to continue to do that. We've seen the positive results that we're seeing on the back of that, 10,000 phone thefts in the last year alone. So, you know, we can see that that shift, that prioritisation is working. That is not without questioning. I want to be clear about that. But it is also, and I know I've said this a number of times now, in the wider consideration of both constrained budgets from within TfL and the Metropolitan Police Service.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hall.
Thank you. For transparency's sake, I need to tell you I think this is absolutely diabolical. People want to join the Metropolitan Police because they're proud of it, they want to wear the uniform, they want to be part of the policing family. And then suddenly, after all of these years of working for the police service, they're thrown aside. You know, we talk about trust and confidence in the police that we need, but surely trust and confidence should come within their own staff to start with. And what trust and confidence have they got if they've been employed, been working for the service for years, and suddenly they're told they're going to be 2P'd out? Tell me, are there any other PCSOs or police officers paid for by TfL or any other functional bodies that provide enforcement duties that might be thrown out like this particular team? Do tell us now. Don't let us find out another way.
No.
Definitely?
Obviously, we have the Metropolitan Police Service has contract with other bodies, both private and statutory, for example, airports, but in a similar context to this, no.
Right. Well, we'll keep you to that because this is actually diabolical. I'm a bit concerned as to whether the Mayor is fully across this, Kaya, I have to say, because he's given contradictory answers. At the MQT in January, he said TfL made the decision rather than ask the MPS to do this work, and the MPS may take the resources away from red routes elsewhere for operational reasons, to contract with somebody else to provide the enforcement. But then in February, MQT changed it to what TfL said is that the MPS, because of a new Met for London plan and the crime-fighting priorities, had decided to stop providing red route enforcement to TfL. So 1 month he's saying it was TfL's call, and the next month he's saying it's the MPS call. So are you advising him on this? Is this why he's confused, or is he just confused on his own?
The Mayor is definitely across this issue. I want to assure you of that. This is a negotiation between two statutory bodies, and therefore there's conversations on both, but the Mayor is definitely across it.
Well, one minute he's blaming one, and the next minute he's blaming the others. And you've actually compared this with moving other teams. It's not the same at all, because you're moving these poor souls out of the police service, which isn't what they wanted to be doing at all. So will the loss of the PCSOs have an impact on neighbourhood policing capacity? And which boroughs is the majority of the enforcement done by these PCSOs?
As previously said, I think this is why it's important that we look at this once we know what the conditions of the neighbourhood policing grant are in relation to PCSOs, so that we can work that through.
So which boroughs is the majority of the enforcement work done by those PCSOs?
I'll have to come back on you.
Well, surely you know, because this is going to have an impact on those boroughs. Surely you know the answer to that. There's a lot of them. If they're doing other duties, which we've been led to believe there are, which boroughs are going to be impacted the most?
It's 60 officers across the red route.
So which, you don't know. I don't know why I'm asking.
I can ask.
You have no idea, do you? You have no idea which boroughs are going to be impacted the most.
That is not a question that I was asked previous to this committee. Otherwise, I would have provided that information. But I am happy to come back to you, Assemblymember Hall, with that granularity.
I'm very upset that you actually haven't asked the question. That it should have come into your own head. Who is this going to really affect? Which boroughs is this going to affect? Is this going to affect boroughs that have got terrible crime rates?
As said previously, the impact of this is being monitored by TfL through the CCTV. The majority of the enforcement action that happens on Redruth is done by CCTV. We have sought reassurance of that from TfL, and that they are working to continue with that.
The one thing you're not thinking about is human beings who've actually taken on a job with the Metropolitan Police, having thought that that is their future. They have given their time, and thank God for them, I say. They've given their time, their years of service, and suddenly they're being thrown out. How do you think you would feel if you were in that position, Deputy Mayor?
I don't agree with that assessment. I think it's really important. It's why we have 2P legislation, that we ensure the rights of workers if those roles do change. That's normal across many sectors, and that's what's happening here in terms of them being offered that. Additionally, as I said, once we get the neighbourhood policing grant, we can look at whether the additional PCSOs, if that's what the conditions say, enable us to continue to look at this issue.
But meanwhile, these people are so upset. Have you spoken to any of them? Because some of us around this table have. They're devastated. They thought they were working for the Metropolitan Police. They were proud to be working for the Metropolitan Police. But suddenly, despite the fact that we have terrible problems getting more police officers and PCSO, despite that, we're just going to throw these away to pay them off to somewhere else. But if we get a bit more money, well, who knows what will happen. There are people at the back of this, and they care and they want to be in the Metropolitan Police.
I know that none of these decisions are easy. That's why they've been called tough choices. All of the discussions we've had at these committees about a lot of operational change in the Metropolitan Police are in the context of us being underfunded by previous governments for a number of years.
Here we go. Same old.
It's true. So in that context, these difficult decisions are being made, and the prioritisation of having officers in neighbourhoods to make sure that Londoners are safe is what we agree with the Commissioner should be the priority, and it's what we're seeing results on. And we must continue to make sure that we talk to government about the need to continue to do that. I've mentioned the NIC today, and to be able to have the funding to do that, and we will continue to do that, because we don't take these decisions lightly.
You actually need to put thought to these human beings that are being thrown out of the Metropolitan Police when we have absolute problems getting more people to go into there. Trust and confidence in the police force, if they can just do this, through the floor, and I would have thought you, and therefore the Mayor, would be thinking more seriously about this.
Last committee, you asked AC Twist, committee members asked AC Twist about recruitment and retention. There's no evidence that there has been issues in recruitment. He said that to you.
I'll leave it there, Chair, because I know things to be different. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 7 minutes before this meeting needs to start being wound up, so I will ask members to be, for brevity in their questioning, please. Assembly Member Best.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Just to remind you that Mayor had to hand millions of pounds back to the previous government because we failed to recruit officers, the only force in England and Wales that did so. That's where the concern around recruitment comes. It seems to be some confusion on your part. You were just referring to Assembly Member Hall to the tough choices, this decision being a result of the tough choices of the Met. But this isn't the tough choices of the Met. This is the decision of TfL, isn't it?
TfL decided, because of their own constrained budget, that the money that they can give in relation to the service level agreement to the Metropolitan Police Service had to reduce.
So you do understand it's not a decision of the Met, because you just said to Assembly Member Hall that it was part of the tough choices of the Met.
In that wider context of the negotiations that the police have had with the TfL on what they can provide in the wider context of the TfL budget of £65 million, those decisions have been made alongside the prioritisation and the Metropolitan Police Service.
So it is a Met and TfL decision?
Yes, I said that previously.
So it's just really confusing, because the Mayor in January said this was a TfL decision. And then he said it was a Met decision a month later. Then I thought we were hearing today it was a TfL decision, and now it's back to being a Met and TfL decision. It's just really hard to keep up with whose decision this is, and obviously it's one that everyone on this committee thinks needs to be revisited, so it's really important to know. So the final answer is that it's Met and TfL together making the decision.
TfL has reduced their budget to the Metropolitan Police Service in line with their wider budget to 65 million. In that context, TfL and the Metropolitan Police Service went into negotiations about what the various things that were provided before and are going to be provided going forward with the service level agreement would be. In that wider consideration, the Commissioner had already prioritised making sure that there's enough officers in neighbourhoods, and that has been reflected in a number of other areas as previously said.
Because in January, the initial reason the Mayor gave for this was that the MPS might take resources away from Red Route, so they were going to use a private contractor to make sure they could optimise enforcement.
TfL understandably want to make sure that they have the ability to continue to enforce
So they want to
Red Route.
optimise enforcement of the Red Routes through using a private company.
They need to continue to enforce the Red Route.
So they want to is it true that they want to optimise enforcement of the Red Routes for a private company?
Sorry, I'd need your definition of optimise in that context.
You want me to define what optimise means?
What,
it means more, improve, like have a higher enforcement rate.
That would have to be a question for TfL. That's not something I've discussed with them.
Okay. Well, no, that's what the Mayor said. So I was just wondering, you tried to sing from the same
obviously
hymn
the
sheet,
Mayor
I'd imagine.
who oversees both bodies might have had that conversation with them. I have not, so
Okay.
I'd have to understand that.
Okay.
Assemblymember Best, I'm really sorry. We do have to move on. I've got two more people. We've got 4 minutes. Assemblymember Roberts.
Quickly, I just want to ask on the
Assemblymember Roberts.
Chair, I haven't had that much.
Assemblymember Best.
I'm just trying.
I asked you to be
Chair,
brief. You've had
you
a
said
few
it's
minutes.
1 minute.
Assemblymember
Roberts. It's been 1 minute, and I just want to
Roberts.
ask on the two. I just want to ask on the 2P.
Sorry, well, you should have asked that at the beginning.
But you didn't tell me I had 30 seconds to ask the question.
Assemblymember Best, you're now taking other members' time.
And when it would be.
Assemblymember Roberts.
Could you inform us when the 2P process will start and whether the protection of staff terms and conditions that they enjoy now will be protected under the contract going forward?
I believe those conversations have already started.
Okay. You believe, so you don't know?
No, I'm confident that they've started.
Okay. The one thing which I think is clear from this whole discussion today, and I will be brief, Chair, I apologise, the previous incumbent in your role was far more willing to be critical of the Metropolitan Police. When she felt that they were making a mistake, she was willing to say so. Unfortunately, far too often in this meeting today, what we've heard is effectively an apologist for the police. This is a wrong decision. People will want to hear you as Deputy Mayor for Policing defending these people. PCSOs are amongst some of the most trusted members of the Metropolitan Police. They are known in their communities, they are loved in their communities, they're respected in their communities. And all we've heard today is a lot of, I'm afraid to say, waffly answers about process. No heart, no compassion, nothing to say, I think this is a wrong step and I will go back to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner and ask him to think again. I mean, if we're looking for money to be saved in the budget at the moment, I think that most people would prefer for that money to be spent on PCSOs than spent on the salary of a deputy mayor who doesn't seem to be willing to stand up to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner. That is all. And that gives me no pleasure to say that, but it's true.
No, I don't think you can talk to me like that and not require me to answer.
Well, you just said you don't think there's a requirement.
I definitely, regularly, I think, in my opinion, I've gone further in the oversight of the Metropolitan Police Service. I've shifted our structures within MOPAC to push it further to make sure that we're having increased oversight of the Metropolitan Police Service. We did a whole review within that to do that. We continue to have robust conversations on many issues. And when I think, as we have just discussed on Stop and Search, on a myriad of other areas, when I have to have difficult conversations with the Metropolitan Police Service, I always do. It's something I pride myself in having honest conversations with the Metropolitan Police Service. Only the other committee was I told that I don't give enough support and confidence to the Metropolitan Police Service, which also is complete nonsense, to be honest. I go out regularly and meet with neighbourhood teams. I've done that, I think, 3 times the last week. I regularly talk to PCSOs and congratulate them in the work they do to support the Metropolitan Police Service. And I continue to do that. However, part of my role is to make sure that the Metropolitan Police Service have a balanced budget. Tough, difficult decisions that aren't always easy. And the reason that we're having this conversation, the reason that these conversations are continuing is because we understand the importance of these people, and the reason that, it's important that they get 2p, and if that's what the route that they want to go down, and the reason that we continue to push for more neighbourhood officers is because something I've said repeatedly in this committee is that community safety and community policing is our priority.
If you're talking about budgets, the Mayor announced a budget just last month which found £142 million of new money, which we have had no sight of at all through the budget scrutiny process. More money could have been found to save these PCSOs' careers and keep them within the Metropolitan Police. If we're talking about budgets, because the Mayor found £142 million that none of us knew anything about, new money, new spending commitments, he could have spent more money on policing. Thank you.
The Mayor did, in that budget, when he found that additional money, spend money on more policing. It's why there's been an uplift on mobile phone theft. It's why there's been an uplift in services to support VORG, and moreover, the continuation of making sure that the quarter of the budget that the Metropolitan Police Service has is provided by the Mayor.
I'm sure that will come as a huge consolation to the 63 people who are effectively being thrown on the scrap heap by this Mayor and this Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Assembly Member Cooper, if you could be very, very quick, please.
Don't give me that. You brought in someone who's not a member of this committee. I'm sorry. I've just, I wanted to ask a question, and we brought in Assembly Member Russell. And my question relates to the job description that these people who are in these 63 posts have. There's a quote from the Metropolitan Police Service who says they are specialists within that field and are wholly aligned to that scope of work. Do they have the ordinary PCSO job description? Is it identical to any other PCSO? If you don't know the answer, then please say so, and please offer to write and confirm that their job description is identical to any other PCSO. They're just doing a particular role.
I can write to follow that up, but also I think there's obviously the job description and then what they've been doing.
Sure. OK. That is always, as we know, not necessarily the same thing. And the point that I wanted to go on then to make is about TUPE, Transfer of Undertakings, Protection of Employment. But in a situation where staff are at risk of redundancy, it is perfectly within the rights of the organisation that has identified a group of staff who may be at risk to offer them TUPE, but if there are other vacancies that are arising in a similar role, for example, a role as a PCSO somewhere else in the organisation, it does not have to be a sequential offer. It can be a concurrent offer rather than sequential. So why are the Metropolitan Police saying to us and to you that they can't consider them where there are vacancies for existing posts, unless you're saying that there are no vacancies, which I find completely impossible to believe, because PCSOs are being promoted to become PCs and some of them are leaving. So there must be vacancies that they could be considered for.
I think this goes back to the point that Kenny was making previously. Currently, these PCSOs are being funded through a a pot of money from TfL, and that's what's being discussed. As I've said, in the wider context of the neighbourhood policing grant, we've asked them to look at, once those conditions have come through, how that could possibly change for those PCSOs who don't want to be 2P'd over.
But obviously, if they're going to be 2P'd over, transfer of undertakings, protection of employment, they will be going over on exactly the same terms and conditions. There will be no diminution in their conditions. So why is TfL discussing what difference does it make to them whether they contract with the police or whether they contract with another organisation? Isn't the real driver of this coming from the Metropolitan Police Service rather than TfL?
As previously said, this is a service level agreement. It takes both sides to agree it. The need of TfL to have enforcement on the red routes
hasn't gone away.
Hasn't gone away, so they need to find a way to do that. Aside from that, the Metropolitan Police Service has also said that they need to prioritise neighbourhood policing. And through the discussions so far, without the full allocation and conditions of the neighbourhood policing grant, we're in this situation, but we will continue to talk it through.
I just don't understand what the saving is to either party here, unless you haven't talked about whether there's some change in supervisory control and removing a series of officers who supervise these officers. Is that the area of saving that for the police here? I don't understand where this, what difference it makes. Why has anyone come up with this as a proposal?
Deputy Mayor, if you could be brief.
Through the reduction has come from TfL only being able to provide less funding, and the Metropolitan Police Service have said in that context, working through a number of proposals about what they can provide to TfL, this is one of the areas that they no longer think can be provided in this current context.
Okay, well, I think we're going to leave it there. And no, I haven't had more time than you. I asked 2 questions.
Okay,
You've
can
had
we
several
can
throughout.
we just
I timed it. I had 3
I'm now
minutes, you had 5.
bringing this meeting to an end. I'd like to thank our guests for attending this morning and for the answers to the questions that have been raised. Deputy Mayor, could I, whilst I appreciate it is part of your job, can I acknowledge and thank you for coming to every single one of the Q&As that we've had, and Kenny for attending when you have as well, which I think is most of the time. Can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Can I ask the committee to note the monthly report from MOPAC? Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Can I ask the committee to note the additional activity undertaken since the last meeting, namely the informal meeting with deaf and disabled organisations and representatives in London? The London Assembly's annual meeting is due to take place in May 2026 and will decide which committees to establish for the 2026-27 Assembly year and a timetable of meetings for those committees when the date of the next meeting for this committee will be set. I have admitted to the agenda one item of urgent business in accordance with section 100B(4)(b) of the Local Government Act 1972, namely to determine whether the committee wishes to recommend a rapporteur appointment to the GLA Oversight Committee at the earliest opportunity, as this is the last Police and Crime Committee meeting of the Assembly year. Assembly Member Best is proposed as a rapporteurship on the recruitment and retention of Metropolitan Police officers. Can we agree this? Yes. Okay, thank you. If there are no further comments, I ask that the committee agrees to recommend this, which we've done. Thank you. I have no urgent other business. This is the last meeting of the Assembly year. I'd like to thank both the scrutiny team, who have been incredible in this very complicated and difficult year. And I'd like to particularly thank Jeanette Roker, and the time that I should have thanked her and I didn't, and then that was my oversight, was particularly during the A New Met for London and turning around our response as a committee, which felt like she did in a number of hours. And Jeanette, thank you, and thank you to your team. And to committee services and to Lauren Harvey, our clerk, who has been our clerk for this committee for a number of years now. How many years? 6 long years. Lauren will be passing on the baton to Sal Fazal, who is here, who's also here shadowing today. Lauren, can I thank you on behalf of the committee for the incredible work that you've done over the last 6 years and steering us through. Thank you very much. Can I thank members for your attendance and your robust questioning over this year. And I look forward to seeing you all next year. Thank you very much.
Okay, right, there you go. That's the end of that. Just quickly, you want to see more of Susan Hall? She will be questioning Sadiq Khan, or Sadiq Khan will be answering questions on Thursday morning. It's going to be an early one. I think it's about 10:15, 10:30 in the morning. So on Thursday, keep your eyes open for that. There's already an event set up for tomorrow's Prime Minister's Question Time with Keir Starmer. So I hope to see you all then. Apart from that, thank you very much for watching today. I know it's been a long one. I will carry on tomorrow and Thursday. Right, take care all. Have a great rest of the day.